I am a practicing doctor from the United States, and I see patients in my clinic every day, and one of the biggest problems that my patients face is that of overweight and obesity. And a number of years ago, I saw this phrase that we need to go to great lengths to avoid great widths. And I think this is an item that the G20 needs to consider, because the problem of global obesity has become extremely severe and is becoming more critical all the time. Humankind has reached the dubious distinction that for the first time in history, there are now more people who are overweight at 1.5 billion than are malnourished and starving, which is about 1.1 billion. In most of the developed world, the problems center on overweight and obesity. But interestingly, in much of the underdeveloped world, there are simultaneous problems where much of the population doesn't have enough calories to eat and is starving, yet much of the population also is overnourished and has a number of diseases secondary to having too many calories. There are a number of diseases that are specifically related to whether we have too many calories to eat or too few. For instance, with undernutrition, our immune system doesn't work properly, and people that are malnourished are subject to infections. There are diseases such as kwashiorkor due to lack of protein, marasmus due to lack of total calories, but there's a completely different set of medical problems that are a result of eating too much. And in particular, the incidence of high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, heart attack and stroke, cancer, arthritis, and asthma are much greater in people who have too many calories to eat and are overweight. For example, high blood pressure and heart attacks are 50% more likely in people who are overweight and twice as likely in people who are obese. Another problem that comes specifically from overweight is what's referred to as type 2 diabetes. And we can see that there are many countries in the world in which type 2 diabetes is affecting 1 out of 10 people, and there are even a few countries where it's approaching 1 in 5 people. And given that type 2 diabetes can rob an individual of as much as 15 years of their life expectancy, this can be an enormous problem. Worldwide, the incidence of type 2 diabetes has increased tenfold in the last 25 years, from 30 million in 1985 to 300 million today. There are, in the United States, 26 million type 2 diabetics. 1.9 million were diagnosed just in 1 year, and that works out to 1 person being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in the United States, just 1 country, every 16 seconds. If we look at the estimated lifetime risk for diabetes for individuals in the United States, they go from a low of about 28% for Caucasian men up to a high of over 52% for Hispanic women. So we now have a disease that is related strictly to overweight that is affecting over 50% of certain ethnic groups. The global obesity forecast suggests that in 2015, according to the World Health Organization, there will be more than 2.3 billion of the 7 billion people on Earth who are overweight and 700 million who are obese. This means that 1 in 3 people on the planet will be overweight and 1 in 10 will be obese, and this will lead to enormous health consequences and expenses. If we look at the distribution of overweight and obesity by country, we can see that our host country, Mexico, has the dubious distinction of being the leader with almost 70% of the population, the adult population, being overweight and over 30% being obese, and closely followed in second place by the United States, where about 68% of the population is overweight. There are significant economic impacts that occur as a result of overweight. First of all are the direct medical costs, because people who are overweight, we know they have several other diseases for which they require care. Overweight individuals and obese individuals, when they go to work, there is decreased productivity compared to normal weight individuals, and there is a much higher incidence of absenteeism in this group as well. The transportation costs are significant. Heavy people, overweight people, require larger vehicles. They require more fuel to move them around. As just one example, jet fuel. 350 million extra gallons of jet fuel per year are needed just because of transporting overweight people. And since jet fuel is now about $4 per gallon, we're talking about 1.4 billion just for moving around by jet overweight individuals. Gasoline for transport in the United States alone is over 2.3 billion in excess costs just because people are overweight. In terms of quality of life issues, we also know that overweight individuals have a decreased incidence of being happily married, they earn less in their jobs, and have a greater incidence of health problems and depression. Total cost of overweight worldwide is over $215 billion per year. One of the true tragedies is what is going on with childhood obesity, which now affects 1 in 3 children in the United States, costing $14.3 billion. One of the biggest problems with childhood obesity is when children are obese, they tend to grow up to be obese adults, and we have very little in the way of medical therapies to change that trend. This is a trend that has been increasing dramatically over the last few decades. We can see that it has more than doubled since 1970 in the last 40 years. There are now in most countries in the developed world twice as many obese children as there were just a few years ago. So the question that we can ask is, what happened? Why are so many people now overweight? And the reason is actually obvious. Very simply, we're consuming more calories than we used to. Just a few years ago, 50 years ago, the average person consumed about 1,900 calories a day, whereas today it's up to 2,700 calories a day, an increase of 44%. And it's in the form of calories that tend to pack on weight, such as refined grains, fats and oils, and sugars. So this creates a problem. If we look at the average United States woman, an average American woman, in 1960 she was 5 feet 3 inches tall, or 1.6 meters, weighed 140 pounds, or 63.5 kilograms. We move forward just 40 years, and the average woman has gained 1 inch in height, but she's gained fully 24.5 pounds, now weighing 164.3 pounds and weighing 74.5 kilograms. Now, this is largely the result of our genes. The problem is that our genetic code has not changed appreciably in the last 50,000 years. This means that our genes, the DNA, the software that runs our bodies, is essentially better adapted to individuals living in the Stone Age, living in caves, foraging for food, running away from danger, as opposed to the modern world. The problem is, if you look at our cell phones, our smartphones, our computers, they update themselves every few days. But the genetic software that updates our body hasn't updated itself in 50,000 years. So what do our caveman and cavewoman genes tell us? Number one, they say, eat sugar and eat fat whenever possible, because what sugar does is we can either burn it immediately for energy, and as a caveman or cavewoman, that conferred a survival advantage, so we could run quickly to escape danger, we could run quickly to catch food, or we could store it as fat, and that's what we tend to do with it today. We eat fat because fat is very rich in calories. Protein and carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram, fat has 9 calories per gram, so we get more bang for the buck when we eat fatty foods. If we are able to combine fat and sugar together into one food, such as ice cream, then we particularly like that because this is consistent with what our caveman and cavewoman genes tell us to do. Now, this information has not been lost on the advertisers, the food industry. They know that we are having these caveman and cavewoman genes, so they capitalize on this, and they prey on it, and they are helping us to listen to what their message is. Not only do our caveman genes tell us to eat fat and sugar whenever possible, they also tell us to exercise only when necessary. When we are running, we burn calories 10 times as fast as when we're lying around resting. So when we lived in a world of starvation, as we did 50,000 years ago, our genetic code, we got plenty of exercise, but our genes told us don't exercise unless you need to because you'll waste the calories. And it would appear that today many of us are following our caveman and cavewoman genes, and we are exercising only when necessary and eating fat and sugar whenever possible. In the future, as Ray Kurzweil and I talk about in our books, we will have these nanobotic robots microscopically floating in our bug streams. They will be doing all kinds of important functions for us. They'll be digesting food. They'll be killing infections. And they'll be available maybe by 2040. And when that time comes, we'll be able to eat whatever we want and not have to worry about it. But in the meantime, we do need to behave ourselves and follow our diets. Now, one way to change behavior is Mayor Bloomberg in New York City has recently suggested legislation where there will be a tax on soft drinks that are larger than 16 ounces or 450 milliliters. This is one way to do it, but I think that there are better ways to do things because people typically respond better to a carrot than a stick. They respond to rewards rather than punishment. And as we look at ways that we can change human behavior, I think that the schools can look at providing rewards for their students that are able to achieve weight loss goals. Insurance companies can provide economic benefits for their subscribers that achieve weight loss goals. Governments can provide tax benefits to their citizens that achieve weight loss goals. So there are many ways that we can approach this global problem. And indeed, it would appear that the time has come for us to go to great lengths to avoid great widths. Thank you very much.
Thank you.